I went through a very difficult time. I decided, I made up my mind. I was done. That song saved me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the KGC show. Today, I am joined by not only a podcast favorite, but a podcast favorite. What do I mean by that? She has her own podcast over in Kelly's Corner, and we want to make sure that she gets the recognition that she so much deserves. You can see her promoting and loving on them Oak Ridge boys just as much as we do here at the show. I'm honored to welcome back not only a great podcast friend, but a great person. Please give it up for the incredibly talented, my friend and yours, the incredible Kelly Cline. What's up, Kelly?
How's it going, Caden? Thank you for having me again.
It's an honor. How you been doing since the last time we chatted?
Doing well. I don't know whether to question your sanity or not. I was shocked when you had me on your podcast before because I never thought that I was interesting enough to be on a podcast, much less have one of my own, and now be invited back on a podcast. But yeah. I'm doing well, staying busy.
That's good. And your love for the Oak Ridge boys is overflowing as always. We'll get to that in just a little bit. We might even get you to share an Oak Ridge boy story in a little bit. But for the people that did not get to see the last episode you were on, I want to know, who is Kelly Cline? When you think about representing yourself, who is Kelly Cline?
I'm me. I big heart. I try to be a person's person and treat you like you want to be treated. What you see is what you get.
That's right. And it's incredible. And I encourage people to go check out Kelly's Corner. But how did you go from, did you ever think that you would have a podcast, let alone be successful as it is?
Absolutely not ever. How it kind of came about is actually kind of a funny story. My brother, several years ago, just randomly one night, sent me a text message, and he was like, "Hey, you should start a podcast." Why would I start a podcast? I'm serious. You need to start a podcast. You need to start a podcast and talk about history. You love history. People would be interested in it. You should start a podcast. Well, I thought he was just kind of joking and just kind of blew it off. Well, from then on, randomly, every couple of weeks, when are you going to start that podcast? When are you going to start that podcast? When are you going to start that podcast? And so I would just kind of just let it go. And, maybe one day. I don't know about that. I'm not like I told you, I'm not interesting enough to start a podcast. Nobody would even listen to me. I would be literally talking to myself. Well, I think you should start a podcast. Well, I guess it was last spring, I shared something on Facebook, just one of those goofy little meme picture things. And it said something about starting a podcast because I talk too much. And people started commenting, "You should start a podcast. You're very interesting. You have a lot to say. You should do one on history specifically because you make it interesting. You make it fun." And so that brought back all of those conversations with my brother. And I started thinking, he's my brother. He kind of has to say that I'm interesting and fun and I should do this. But all of these other people, they don't have to say stuff like that. And, being a sibling, he could be just telling me that to watch me make a fool out of myself and be able to say that he was the cause of it. It's like a practical joke. But all of these other people don't have to. And so I just kind of threw it out to a friend of mine, Tyler Kinnaman, just kind of really still just kind of joking around with it. And I was like, "Hey, thinking about starting a podcast on history specifically. These people say I should, and I'm thinking about it." Well, I was expecting him to kind of laugh about it and that be the end of the conversation, but no. He agreed and took off, and literally within about 2 days, I had not only decided to do a podcast, but had the artwork for the podcast. You and I had just talked about me having a podcast. The whole thing was laid out. And the next thing I knew, I was starting an episode. But it literally all started from a conversation with my brother as a joke.
And from there, you have grown into a great podcast host. Now, what is one of the things that you've learned about yourself doing this podcast?
I think one of the things that was most shocking to me in doing the podcast is that, first and foremost, that I'm not just talking to myself, even though technically you are. People have actually tuned in and listened. Like, one of the most shocking things to me was when I pulled up the stats. Somebody actually listens to me in the United Kingdom. So literally not just the South, not just America, but people are listening to me across the world, to these goofy little history facts that I really didn't think anybody would care about.
Well, people do care about not only what you have to say, but like what you said, you make history fun. And where did
Right, and that's where I think history gets a bad rap, because high school specifically, where you either love or hate a subject, teachers just read this chapter in the book and answer the questions at the end. Here's your vocabulary words for the chapter, and here's your test. There's no interaction. Here's this little fun fact about what you're going to read about. Or after you read it, here's the fun fact about what you just studied. It's black and white on the paper. Here's your test. And there's so much more to history that is lost, because whether or not they know it, they're not telling people. And you need history, specifically history, because it gets a bad rap for being boring. You need teachers that love it, that can make it fun, that make it interesting.
Where did your love for history start?
My love for history goes back to the first grade. God's honest truth, I was homesick from school, and I was watching The Price is Right, of all things, because that's what you watch when you have a sick day. You're watching The Price is Right. I was watching The Price is Right, and I've always loved Bob Barker. I grew up with Bob Barker. Drew Carey's great, but he's not Bob Barker, and he never will be. But I was watching The Price is Right at my grandparents' house, and the president cut in, giving an address on, I don't even remember what he was speaking on, but he was giving an address. He cut in for some breaking news. So I started asking my grandmother, who's this man on TV? Why did he cut in on The Price is Right? I'm missing my show because of him. Who is this guy, and why does he think that he has the right to cut in on The Price is Right? And so she starts explaining to me that he was the president, and whatever national crisis was going on needed to be addressed, and all this. And I was like, well, what is the president? So she gets out the old school encyclopedia, the hardback one that's like got the tan binding with a little bit of the green on it. She gets out the encyclopedia from like the 1960s, maybe the early 70s, but I think it was the late 60s. She gets out the P encyclopedia and flips open to the president. So she shows me all the presidents laying there on the page laid out. These are the presidents that are the leaders of the country. She starts telling me about them, and this is George Washington, and he's the first, and this is Abraham Lincoln, and just kind of going through them. Well, one in particular caught my attention. And it wasn't George Washington, and it wasn't Abraham Lincoln. It was the one way far over to the right, one of the last ones on the page. And he caught my attention, I kid you not, because he had brown hair like me. Who is this one? He looks really young. And honest to goodness, that's what I said. I have a photographic memory. I can take you right back there to that day sitting at that table. Who is this one? He looks really young. Well, that's President Kennedy, and he was the youngest president. She said he was the youngest president that we had, but he was not. Whether or not she misspoke, I don't know, but he was not the youngest president. He was the youngest president elected to date, but not the youngest president. Theodore Roosevelt holds that by a couple of months. Theodore Roosevelt, when President McKinley died, when he was assassinated, he was 42, and Kennedy was 43. So to date, Theodore Roosevelt holds it's all about your wording. He holds the title of being able to say the youngest president to ever serve. but Kennedy was the youngest president ever elected. And so that's where it all started, on a sick day from school. And that was when I was in the first grade. By the end of my first grade year, I could say all of the presidents in order from front to back. And by the end of the second grade year, I could say them backwards to forward. Now, obviously, since then, we've added quite a few, but I can still do it.
Yeah. This is why we love not only you, but did you ever think in that your first grade year that all of these years later, that not only would it still be your favorite subject, but you would have a podcast revolving around that subject?
Absolutely not. Absolutely. And see, I even brought history to your podcast because I gave you a little bit of wording history there with Theodore Roosevelt and President Kennedy. But no, I did not. I just kind of, it just kind of stuck, and I went with it. I don't think anybody, my parents or anybody, thought that was going to be a lifelong endeavor for me. I think they kind of just thought it was going to be like one of those kid things where you're fascinated with it for a couple of weeks and then it just kind of passes. And then those weeks came and went and it stayed. And then those months came and went and it stayed. And if I was at my house right now, I'm actually in a hotel in Memphis for work. But if I were at my house right now, I would show you my bookcase with all of my history books on it and the big, huge bust I have at the top of President Kennedy that a friend bought me a couple of years ago from the thrift store. She saw it, and it's one of the biggest busts I've ever seen. She saw it and thought about me and couldn't leave without it. And so I have a huge bust sitting on top of my bookcase now.
Well, maybe when you get back home, maybe that's just something we might have to do. We might have to go down the history rabbit hole and take a peek into Kelly's Corner one of these days.
Absolutely. I plan on recording a new episode this week.
Well, that excites me. Do you still get excited to do podcasts? I know you get busy with life and work and everything, but does that thrill of getting to do a podcast still excite you?
Oh, yes, because they're all different. Like there's not a podcast episode that is exactly the same. It's all different. It's all different topics. It's been like you said, I've been busy with work and life and things, so I haven't had a chance to record one lately. But there will be one coming this week, and it's probably going to encapsulate a lot of surrounding my birthday. A few weeks ago, I turned 40, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that and a little bit about what happened prior to me being born. There's a story there as well. So kind of, I guess, the history of me. But what people might not know is that I was actually born the day the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded. Literally minutes after the explosion. Like my parents remember right after I was born being still in the delivery room, in the operating room there, and the doctors and nurses talking about it, about the explosion happening, literally minutes after I was born.
Wow. You are.
And so it's kind of cool. I shouldn't say the word cool, but it is kind of cool in a way, being born on a day when something like that happens. Because when you have a monumental day, it's a monumental day for that too. And your birthday is all over the news. Like I couldn't, on my birthday, January 28th of 2026 this year. Obviously, I turned 40, so it was the 40th anniversary of the Challenger explosion too. And I couldn't go to Facebook posts or to X posts without seeing something about the Challenger. And I've always felt a connection to those astronauts, and even Krista McAuliffe, who was supposed to be the first teacher in space, who passed away on that. On the Challenger spaceship. I've always felt a special connection to them. And I guess I probably always will. I guess maybe because their life was ending as mine was just starting out.
Would you say, in a weird, twisted sense of way, that the reason why you love history so much is because you're a part of history?
I think I would. I really do. I've thought that a lot, because I came into the world wrapped into literally minutes away from a major historic event, because it was People today may not think it was such a big deal, but back then it was a huge deal. Like it was enough that President Reagan, who was supposed to give the State of the Union address that day, decided not to give the State of the Union and address the nation from the Oval Office on the Challenger explosion. And people tend to forget Krista McAuliffe was a civilian. She was not an astronaut. She was chosen out of, I think it was 11,000 teachers that submitted applications, I guess, to go into space. And she was going to give lessons, science lessons and various lessons to school children from space during that during the mission. And so because she was on board that spacecraft, there were school children across America watching that morning and saw what happened. Thousands of school children and her own personal children. I think one was like maybe 11 and one was like 3 or 6 or something. And they were actually in the audience watching. So, I mean, it affected multi-generations of people. I mean, it was a huge news story back then.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing some of Kelly's Corner. And, you know, that's what I love most about it is that you bring a little of your podcast to me and my show for my incredible audience. So,
well, you have to. I mean, yes. I have to demonstrate what people, could get if they tune in.
That's right. And I encourage people everywhere that watch this show to please check out Kelly's Corner. It's an incredible show about history and music, which we're about to get into in just a second. But what it is it's like going to school, adult school, that it's not boring. You don't want to fall asleep with a pen and paper. You actually want to hear what Kelly has to say. And that's why a lot of people, especially in the UK, gravitate towards you, is because you're so interesting, and everybody can learn something at Kelly's Corner.
I would also like to say, along those same lines, not only does somebody in the UK watch it, but my brother, who initially told me that I needed to start the podcast, he actually tunes into the episodes. If your sibling tunes into the episodes, you're probably doing something right.
Right. I can't get any of mine to tune in.
That's about the highest stamp of approval I think somebody could get, is that their sibling watches their episode or whatever it is they're involved in.
Yeah. Amen. And from history, we're going to take a side turn into music, because that is another one of our passions, because a lot like you, I love history too. It just doesn't show. Read in between the lines, people. But you not only, we'll talk about what you just got to do a couple weeks ago in a few minutes, but is there a certain song in your life that helped you get through hard times now and when you were younger?
When I was younger as a child, probably not, because I didn't appreciate music the way that I probably should have, or the way that I do now, and I think that's probably true for everyone. I liked music, and I can remember certain songs. When I was little, there was a particular Oak Ridge Boys song that my grandmother, she used to tell a story that when I was fussy and she couldn't get me to calm down, if she played Juliet, and she would dance with me, and I would immediately it would kind of soothe me, I guess, and I would fall off to sleep. Juliet was a big one. She liked the Oak Ridge Boys, so she listened to the Oak Ridge Boys a lot. But Juliet was one of her favorites. So she listened to Juliet a lot. And that's one that she specifically mentioned that she could get me to go to sleep on. She also was a fan of the Boot Scoot Boogie. And I remember dancing in her living room to the Boot Scoot and Boogie, which was a popular song back when I was a wee little thing. But as I grew up and started appreciating music more, there is a song that stands out to me that quite literally changed my life. I can say that without a doubt, without question. In 2017, I went through it was absolutely the darkest time of my life, the hardest time of my life, for a couple of different reasons that we don't necessarily have to get into. But I went through a very difficult time. And through various things and various life happenings, I decided, I made up my mind that I was done. Like, I was tired of dealing with it, and that anything was better than what I was going through at that particular moment in time. And so I made up my mind that was going to be how it was going to be, and whatever happened. That I basically, and I'm going to use these words for a reason. I had surrendered myself, saying what will be will be. Remember that, because it's going to come up in just a minute. And so I made some arrangements, made some plans, and decided that May 25th of 2017 was going to be it. I was done. All these years later, I still cannot say the word. There is a word for what I'm talking about, and I think you know what it is, but all these years later, I still cannot say it. But I can right along the edges of it. I just cannot come right out and say the word. But I decided I was done. I was tired of dealing with what I was going through, and I was done. And so I literally told Alexa, like I said, I'd made all of the plans, had what I needed to have to do what I was going to do. And I had decided that I was going to literally play one more song and then do it. And that was going to be it. And so I quite literally told Alexa, the exact words I said was, play an Oak Ridge Boys song for my final song. I was expecting Elvira, or the I'll Come Back Saloon, or American Made, or any number of another hit that Alexa could come up with. But at that moment, God stepped into my story and took over Alexa. And God allowed a song to play that was not a hit. In fact, I had never heard of the song that I'm talking about until May 25th of 2017. Didn't even know it existed. God knew that I didn't need an Elvira. He knew I didn't need the I'll Come Back Saloon, which happens to be one of my favorite Oak Ridge Boys songs, by the way. He knew I didn't even need American Made. God knew that I needed You Happen to Me. Do you know the song?
I do.
Wow. I'm shocked, because many people don't, because it was not a hit. It was never released as a single. It was purely an album cut. But the first verse of the song is, You Happen to Me, just in time to save me from me. I had surrendered myself, saying what will be, will be. Literally what I just told you. And so as the words came out of Dwayne's mouth, in his smooth, calm, peaceful voice, poured over me like I cannot even explain it. It felt like he took his arms and just wrapped them around me and just held me. And I started to calm down. Not the first time, of course, but I played it probably, I probably listened to that song 500 times that night, over and over and over, sitting there in my room. I can take you back. If I was at home, I could take you to the exact spot where I was sitting the first time that song played. Now, the room looks completely different now, but I could take you there and show you where I was sitting. Again, photographic memory. It's both a blessing and a curse. But I can take you to the exact spot and show you where I was sitting. And like I said, I listened to it over and over. And every time I listened, the depression started to kind of ease a little bit and go away. And literally for months, I held on to that song. And every time I felt myself starting to slip back into that dark place, never to the extent it was that night, I would play that song over and over and over and let Dwayne just kind of sing peace to me, sing peace to my heart. And I held on. And even to this day, I will tell you that song is mine. God gave that song to me. He might have used Dwayne to sing it, but that song is mine. And I claim it as such. I call it my song. I've even told Dwayne that it's my song. But that song, literally in the most pivotal moment of my life, where I'm literally at a crossroads between making this decision and that decision, that song saved me. I literally had surrendered myself to what will be, will be. And that song was there. And even to this day, all these years later, almost a whole decade, my goodness, where has the time gone? Almost an entire decade later, if I'm having a bad day, or if things aren't going my way, or even if I get a little bit sad, that's my go-to. And it'll speak to me, maybe not to that extent, but it'll speak to me. And it's kind of my anthem of, you know what, it's okay. You survived your very worst day. Whatever this minor little problem is, you got it. And the song is always there. You know, music is very healing. And, you know, the guys have spoken about the healing powers of music over the last 2 years when they've experienced some of the worst trials and tragedies they've ever experienced. You know, they music has the same effect on singers just like it does us as listeners. You know, it has healing properties. And, you know, when they sing, it heals a little part of them every time they sing.
Because you mentioned the Oak Ridge Boys and that song in particular, all of these years, what does it mean now that you get to call the Oak Ridge Boys friends and get to have that personal connection with actually the guy who helped you get through that dark time, Mr. Dwayne Allen?
I will tell you, it still blows my mind that I can call them friends and that they call me friends. I mean, that's still, it amazes me. Um, but after I kind of healed a little bit and got away from that place, I knew in my heart that I wanted to tell him. Now, in my mind at that point, you know, celebrities were high and mighty and didn't really care about the rest of the world. But my entire thought of what a celebrity is has completely been flipped upside down by these guys, 100%. Um, but whether or not he cared about it, I wanted to tell him. Because I think if somebody has an impact on your life and somebody changes your life for the better, they need to know. And I wanted to be the one to tell him. I didn't want him to have to find out when he got to heaven. I wanted him to find out here when I could tell him. And so um, it took me a little bit of time to build up the courage, I guess, because there's such a stigma around what I just talked about. And that's why I think a lot of people get into trouble because they're afraid to reach out and ask for help. Now, somebody else's help is probably not going to be in the form of you happen to me, and it's probably not going to be in the form of Dwayne Allen's voice, but that's what God used to help me. But there is help, but there is still a stigma around mental health. And so I was a little nervous about telling him because I didn't want him to think I was crazy. I didn't want to, I guess, be judged for what I thought about doing. Um, and so it took me a long time to actually build up the courage to say, look, this is what you did, whether you realized it or not. I mean, you didn't even know I existed at the time. But you helped me on the day that I needed help the most. it probably took me, I don't know, 6 months or so before I ever built up enough courage to. I had the message typed all out in my phone, like there was a note, and in fact, I think it's probably still there because I had this bad habit of not deleting notes. Um, but I had this message typed out for months, explaining to him exactly where my mind was that day, what got me into the shape that I was in, and what he did for me. And like I said, it sat there probably 6 months before I ever got the courage to send it. And even when I sent it, in my mind, I'm thinking he's either going to brush this off and just think I'm some kind of idiot, or judge the fact that I almost did what I did. Um, but that was not what I found. Not at all. Um, I found compassion. I found somebody who, maybe not to the extent of loss that I had suffered. It didn't get to the dark place. Loss is loss. But he walked the same road that I did with loss. Um, and instead of being, I don't want to say laughed at or made fun of, but ridiculed, I guess, as I was expecting, um, I found quite the opposite. I was embraced, um, and I was appreciated for sharing the story. And we quite literally have a connection that nobody else has with Dwayne Allen. Um, for what it's worth. But it's special to be able to tell somebody that they and their song quite literally saved your life. Because make no mistake, if Elvira had played that day, we probably would not be having this conversation. Just being real and being honest, we would not be, because I know where my mind was. And the literal first verse of that song was everything I was about to do. I mean, if you go back and look at the words, that song was where I was at. And it made me stop and pause just long enough to think about it. And it was what I needed. But there's something special about being able to tell somebody, thank you for the song that literally changed your life. And I was able to tell him, I worked up enough courage finally and told him. I'd kind of made inferences to it in Facebook posts that, there's a special song out there that you really don't know what it did for me, but it kind of did something a little bit. But one day I got up enough courage to really tell him what his song did and how it impacted my life. And then last year at the Southern Gospel Music Association Hall of Fame, he was actually inducted into the Southern Gospel Music Association Hall of Fame last September. And at the induction, he did a thing after it where he kind of signed some autographs and kind of did a little meet and greet with people. And somebody, and I have yet to figure out who did it, but about 6 months prior to that, somebody sent me the record, the album that You Happen to Me is on, from 1974. I have no idea who sent it to me. It's one of my most prized possessions. So whoever did it, thank you. You will probably never know the impact that it had on me, receiving that and how special that gift was. But I've never been big into signatures, never been big into autographs, but I wanted him to sign that one. And so I took it with me to the Southern Gospel Music Association Hall of Fame. And I got in line that night and stood there and let him sign it for me. And I think it was just as special for him to sign that album, knowing my story and knowing how that album, and in particular that song, how it impacted me. I think it was just as special for him as it was for me, being able to sign it. And that night, for the first time, we had encounters over and over, but never to that length of period of time where we actually really got to have an in-depth conversation. That night was the very first time that I was actually able to look him in the eyes while he's literally holding that album in his hand. I was able to look him in the eyes and thank him to his face, in his eyes, for the song that saved my life.
On an Oak Ridge Boys story, try to beat that. Because not only does music heal people, the Oak Ridge Boys and what their music is, like what Kelly was just talking about, it's more than just the words they're singing. You feel it. If you get, Kelly goes to almost 100 concerts a year of those boys.
I don't know about that now.
But I I know it when the boys are up this way up here in Spokane that they're not just here to put on a performance. They're here because that's what they love to do.
Mm-hmm.
Every song that those guys sing, whether it be Richard, whether it be William Lee, Dwayne, or Joe, or Ben, all five of those guys, or all five and four of those guys have a passion, and that passion is music, and it shows. So, to the Oak Ridge boys, first off, to Dwayne Allen, congratulations on being inducted into the Southern Gospel Music Hall of Fame. You should have already been there already, and all
Absolutely.
of the Oak Ridge boys should have already been there.
Absolutely.
But it could not have happened to a greater person than Dwayne Allen. And
Absolutely. Better late than never.
better late than never. And
It's about time they corrected their mistake. I
correct.
will tell you, the Southern Gospel Music Association Hall of Fame is voted on by fans, 100%. That is fan voted.
And another Oak Ridge boy was inducted that night, too, if I believe. Gary McSpadden, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And to show you the true Oak Ridge boy fans we are, we know who Gary McSpadden is. Typical fans might not, but we do.
Probably not. Probably not. They're
He was
thinking,
there
who is
before
that guy?
he replaced or William Lee replaced him, or the guy that William, never mind, different podcast for a different
I would
time.
imagine after this podcast airs that Gary McSpadden's going to get some hits on Google with people looking up to see exactly who he is.
Sorry for the confusion, but he's an incredible singer that is incredibly missed. I still can't believe he's
Yes.
gone.
Yes.
Same thing with Joe Bonzel. But
Yeah.
um, did you ever have a Joe encounter?
I did not.
But you were telling me before the show you have some pretty cool things that happen because you get to go see the guys that often. You actually took a road trip from where you live up to Montana to see the Oak Ridge boys. What was that
Kind
like
of.
for you?
I took a mixture between a road trip and a plane trip to Montana from Alabama. I'm a planner by nature. I like to have everything planned out in order. If you ever go on a trip with me, especially to somewhere like Washington, D.C., which I love, or Boston, or somewhere like that, um, I'm going to probably 99.9% of the time have an itinerary laying out what we're going to do on what day. Um, but last summer, uh, I collect postcards. That's something that not too many people know, but I collect postcards. And I got to looking at my postcard collection and realized that I had a postcard from every single state except one, Montana. And I was telling a friend of mine, Tyler Kinnaman, I think I mentioned him earlier in the show, about having these postcards and how I needed one from Montana. And I was just kind of joking with him, and I was like, I wonder if I could tell Dwayne or William Lee to get me a postcard and send it to me. Completely my collection. How cool would that be? And he was like, well, why don't you just go to a show? They're going to be 3 or 4 times in Montana. Why don't you just fly up for the weekend and go go see a show and then go get you a postcard yourself? That'd be a much better story. And he said it just kind of joking. Um, don't say stuff to me unless you're serious. Because I was like, well, could I do it? I don't need to do it. No, that's just, well, maybe I could. No, I don't need to do it. And I kind of went back and forth. And I went to bed one Friday night, and I had decided I was not going. Like, I was just gonna, I'll get the postcard when I get the postcard. Friday night now, I went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night. This is a once in a lifetime chance. You're gonna kick yourself if you don't do it. Laying in my bed, I kid you not, laying in my bed, I booked a flight. I flew to Denver because flights were considerably cheaper. I flew to Denver because I didn't want to blow my concert budget for the whole year on one concert. I flew to Denver, rented a car, decided, okay, I'm going to do it. Got my hotel. I'll just drive from Denver to Billings, see the show. So literally, when I booked this flight, got the ticket, did all that, the show. Keep in mind, I'm a planner, very rigid structure, itinerary, the whole deal. We're 10 days away from the show. One of the most spontaneous things I have ever done in my entire life was put this trip together. So 10 days later, now keep in mind, I made all these reservations, made all these plans, had not even requested off for work because I needed like 2 days off from work to do this. Had not even requested off from work. So I joke sometimes that when I request off, I'm not really requesting. I'm more or less telling you that I'm not going to be there, which is usually a joke. That time it was serious because I had money invested. So I'm literally telling you, I'm not coming. You might as well go ahead and sign the slip because Kelly won't be there. Um, so the time came. I flew to Denver, rented the car, drove to Montana, which required driving up through Wyoming, which I'd been to Wyoming, but never actually in Wyoming, like really in Wyoming. Um, and so I stopped they were having Frontier Days in Cheyenne, Wyoming at the time. So I stopped there and spent about a half a day in Cheyenne seeing Frontier Days, and seeing the Cowboy Museum and all of that, which is another interesting thing about me. I don't really like rodeo or whatever, anything like that, but I'm very interested in Lane Frost and his life, and his statue is actually there at the Cowboy Museum. He was actually killed in July of 1989 at Frontier Days in that arena that is there. So I got to see that, which I guess goes back to the history in me. And when I was growing up, Luke Perry and 8 Seconds was a big thing. It was a big movie back then, which kind of introduced me to who Lane Frost was. And then doing research on him now, I just think he was a stand-up guy. I didn't get to meet him here, but I'm thankful to know that I'll get to meet him one day in heaven. But did that and then continued on my little way onto Montana. And got to Montana, was walking, came time for the show, was literally walking down the street, down this sidewalk. And I saw William Lee walking down this alleyway. And I was about halfway down the sidewalk. And so I knew if I called to him, first of all, it would cause a scene. And I'm not a scene causer for the most part. Although if you ask my friend Heather, she will tell you at an Oak Ridge Boys concert that you can't take me anywhere because I'm going to meet somebody that knows me from Twitter or has seen me from Twitter. It's inevitable. It's going to happen. It happens every single time. And I'm good with it. If you see me at an Oak Ridge Boys concert or even out, by all means, come say hey to me. I'm good with it. Love meeting new people. But I was about halfway down the block from him, and I didn't want to yell at him because he would have to wait on me because you could tell he was kind of trying to get to the bus. And so I was like, well, I was really trying to get William Lee because I wanted to meet him, shake his hand, talk to him for a second, and it didn't work out. And I was a little bit disappointed for about 10 seconds. And then at 11 seconds, here comes somebody else walking down the alley. It was my buddy Dwayne, who I did yell at from halfway down the block. And just like I knew William Lee would do, Dwayne stopped and waited on me. And we got to have a nice little conversation outside the bus in Billings, Montana. and I told him that I had my phone in my hand, and which was it's very not normal for me. It's usually in my back pocket. But for whatever reason, that particular day, I had my phone in my hand, and he was like, "Hey, are we gonna take a selfie?" Well, I take terrible selfies. Like I can't get the angles right. I don't know. I cannot take a selfie to save my life. Um, but if Dwayne Allen asks if you're going to take a selfie, you take a selfie. Let's just be real. So I was like, yeah, we can take a selfie. I said, I take terrible selfies, but we can take one. Like, I might cut your head off, but, we can take a selfie. He's like, it's going to turn out just fine. And so I joke that is the best, worst selfie Montana has ever seen.
Can't be too bad. I've visited there. But congratulations to making it all the way to Billings, Montana, just to see an Oak Ridge Boys show and get your last postcard.
I did. I have about 20 Montana postcards. I got my worth in postcards. I think I got about 20, somewhere between 20 and 25 postcards. Um, so I have literally a postcard from every state now. If you're interested to know, state number 49 that I got my postcard from, which gave me one final state, happened to be the great state of Alabama, which is ironically enough the state that I was born, raised in, and have lived my entire life in. And it was
You
number
ever
49.
make it up this way?
I've never been to Washington. I have a postcard from Washington from somebody went to Washington and brought me a postcard. So I have one. I think it's from Vancouver, Washington, maybe.
Well, we don't consider them Washingtonians. They're Canadians.
Well, then I need a Washington postcard now. So the Oak Ridge Boys need to go back to Washington so I can get me a true Washington postcard.
Or how about this? Since you've been gracious enough with your time, I will get you one. I'll get you a
Thank you.
Spokane, Washington one.
Yes.
And
Thanks.
I'll sign it if that means
Thanks.
anything. But
It does.
you got to experience not only the Oak Ridge Boys, but a couple of weeks ago in your home state of Huntsville, Alabama. That's not the state. Alabama's the state. Huntsville's the city, I'm assuming.
Rocket City.
You got to experience something that I wish they would bring up here. The All-Star 90s tribute with acts like Neil McCoy, Mark Chestnut, Deanna Carter, so many of our great country 90 artists that we love their music, but we really don't know them besides their hits. What was that like for you?
That was amazing. To put it in a word, I just happened to be scrolling on Facebook the day that it was announced, and it came up. And I realized that it was going to be literally a week after I turned 40. And reading the people that were going to be there, I was like, my best friend from high school and I have to go to this show. Like, there is no way we can miss it. And so I sent her a text, and I was like, a screenshot of it, and I was like, we've got to go to this show. And she's like, oh yeah, when tickets come out, like in like 2 days, get us some tickets, we're going to go. And so, because we grew up listening to those hits, listening to those artists, like those artists were our childhood and our preteen years, and even our teen years were those artists. We would, ride around my hometown of Oxford, Alabama, in her mother's Ford Explorer. I don't know why all of our adventures happened in her mother's Ford Explorer, but they did. But we would ride, and we got in some dillies of some situations in those Ford Explorers. But we did. We rode around listening to, like you said, Neil McCoy, Wade Hayes, Lee Greenwood was there. That was amazing. All of these people that you're not going to find a show that has 40 different artists show up for. Tracy Byrd ended the show with Watermelon Crawl. It could not have ended more perfectly. I mean, it was amazing from start to finish. During the intermission, the highlight for the night for me, when I was 8 years old, this artist had a CD released, his very first CD. His name was Brian White. He released his very first CD. And you could not convince the 8 and 9 year old me that I was not going to marry that man. When I saw his name on the list of being at this show, and I say that jokingly, but I was very serious back in those days. Very serious about the fact that I was going to marry that man. I say it jokingly now, but when I saw his name on the list, I was like, I don't care if I have to go to this show by myself. I'm going to go. But like I said, my best friend from high school went, and she actually had me create a playlist of all of the people that were going to be there and their big hits, and then other songs that we listened to growing up and in high school when we were running around. And we listened to the 90s playlist that I created all week. Now, I did take some playlist creator liberties, and I did add some Oak Ridge Boys in there. I would not be me if I didn't, because one thing that I do say is that it's not a road trip if you don't have Elvira. It's not a road trip till Elvira plays. So I had to add Elvira, and of course I had to add the I'll Come Back Saloon and a couple of others. But I created us a playlist, and off we went. Well, the highlight of the night for me came after intermission. Now, right before intermission, this couple behind us decided that it would be a good thing to do to spill their alcoholic beverage on me and my friend. And so I had red punch of some sort down my back of my favorite shirt, I might add. Um, I was so mad. But during intermission, we went to get a drink, and then I went to the restroom to see how bad my shirt was, to mainly to see if it was going to be salvageable, to see how mad I needed to be. But we came back, and we're walking down to our seats. We sat on the third row of this show, so we had amazing seats. And we're walking back to our seats, and off to the left in this corner, I see Brian White standing there. Now, keep in mind, up until a couple of years ago, when I met Dwayne Allen, I would have not ever, in my wildest, shyest dreams, because I used to be, believe it or not, I used to be relatively shy. I would have never even thought about, hey, why don't you go walk up to that guy and ask him if he can take a picture with you, before I met Dwayne Allen. That changed everything for me, apparently. It gave me all the bravery in the world, apparently. Because when I saw him standing there, like, there was no second thought. Like, I'm going to go talk to him, and I'm going to go see if he'll let me take a picture with him. Even if I have to take a selfie, I'm taking a picture if he'll let me. And so I walked up to him. One of the nicest people you will ever want to meet. And I asked if we could take a picture, and he's like, yeah, sure. Before I even got the whole sentence out of my mouth, his arm was wrapped around me, ready to go. And I'm just going to tell you, when he wrapped his arm around me, I could have just died. In fact, I think I said I could just die about 100 times between that point and the end of the show. Like, as I was walking back to my seat, there was a lady in the row in front of us, and she had watched what had happened, and I'm like, she could tell that I was starstruck. And at this point, with some of the associations that we have, it's a little bit hard to get me completely starstruck. I was starstruck that night, not even going to lie. Brian White is in a totally different league, because, like I said, I was going to marry that man, than the Oak Ridge Boys. I was starstruck. And I was walking back, and the lady sitting in front of me, she said, that just made your whole night, didn't it? And I said, yeah, I could absolutely just die and be okay with it. And she says, well, he could have at least sang Rebecca Lynn, which was another one of his hits. And I was like, yeah, he could have, but I could just die. He couldn't do anything wrong now. But the show was about half over at that point, and it took me several songs to reel myself back in enough to realize that the show was still going on, and I still needed to have a little bit of fun. But that was by far the highlight of my life, my night. In fact, he actually asked if I was having a good time, and I told him, yeah, the best part of it was you. But yeah, it was an amazing night. It's going to be on TV. They recorded it. I don't know if you knew that or not, but they recorded it. And it's going to be on TV. I think they said PBS, but they have not decided when it's actually going to air. And sitting on the third row, I will tell you, if I don't make it on TV, it's going to be a miracle, because they kept that camera stuck in my face.
Everybody loves Kelly Cline.
And I do too. Kelly, I do got a question for you. If you were to ask me any question, because you are a podcast host, do you have a question for this man right here?
I do, Caden. I do, actually. I know last week you debuted your episode with William Lee Golden, our friend. Who is your favorite person to interview of all the interviews you've done? This is going to be a twofold question. Who is your favorite? And is there anybody that you haven't interviewed that you would like to interview?
You know, there's nobody in the world. You back me up, and anybody watching this can back me up on it. If you get the chance to meet William Lee Golden, always do it. Oh, he is as funny and amazing as he lives up to be. With that being said, that is my that's my Brian White to me. To me, that's who I admire, and his version of "Time Has Made a Change in Me" on the Rock of Ages record, kind of like what you were talking about earlier. That to me is my song, not Elvira, not Bobby Sue, not anybody else, not "Did I Make a Difference." Name that song. Uh,
I've
but
told
it's
Dwayne many times, yes, yes, you did make a difference.
It's that song. Time has made a change in me. Listening to his verses on that song, man. If you don't listen to it right, if it doesn't affect you and make that hair stand up on your arm, you didn't listen right. Now, with that being said, every guest is a blessing within itself. Yourself, I've had some great people over my 6 years that I celebrated on Valentine's Day of being the pleasure of hosting.
Well, happy anniversary.
Well, thank you. But, the most important guest to me is the next one. And the reason why is because I never know who I'm going to interview. Even though I book the shows, I don't know who I'm going to interview. But you never know what they're going to bring. You never know what kind of entertainment that they're going to bring. And let's edit. But, you know, Brian White would be a good artist to interview. Neil McCoy, some of those historical country music figures that we talked about here on the show today. Some of those artists I would really love to get on, but I love interviewing my independent artists. I love talking to fellow podcast hosts. But most importantly, and I think you can agree to this too, that every time that I record an episode, it's a gift from God saying, all right, go make me happy. Not promote me, but go give my blessing or go give the gift that I give you to the other
If he's giving
people.
you a story to tell, you need to do your best to tell it.
That's right.
And I say that knowing full well that the story that I shared tonight, I didn't tell for a long time. Several years, actually, I didn't tell. And I didn't tell it for a reason. And the reason is simple. Whether it makes sense to anybody else, it made sense to me. I didn't want to tell my story to somebody else until I had the opportunity to tell it to the person responsible. And I literally prayed every single day that God would graciously allow me the opportunity to tell Dwayne how he helped me, how he impacted my life, and how he made a difference. And I didn't want to share my story with anybody until I could share it with him. And when I finally found the courage to tell him, now, we were kind of friends before then, but I kind of held back because I was scared. I was nervous of how he would respond. But once I finally found the courage to tell him, I was like, okay, you've got the story. Now share it. Because God's giving you a testimony for a reason. Your testimony is not for you. Your testimony is for somebody else. Because you never know what somebody else is going through, and you never know yours might be the story Yours might be the connection that they need to give them the strength to hang on, to give them the courage to make it to another day. And so, because of that, I encourage anybody, if God's given you a testimony, no matter what it is, no matter whether it's, something life altering like mine or just a story to tell with a podcast, tell it, and tell it to the best of your ability, because you never know who's listening. You never know whose life you're literally going to alter by telling that story. You might give them, because everybody goes through different things. And the person you pass on the street, your coworker sitting at the desk beside you, you don't know what they're going through. So share with them. Don't keep it to yourself. But I felt like it was important that he needed to be the one to hear it first before I shared that part of the story with everybody else.
Wow. People like you and hearing stories like that rev me up and make me want to do more of these shows, because it's exactly what you said. You never know who's on the
Right.
other side watching this.
Right. And
I'm
with
going to
the
tell you
topic
something.
with the
That
topic like we talked about tonight, depression is prevalent in the world that we live in. More people than not suffer with it. And they suffer in silence because there is a stigma to it. Because people aren't talking about it. Now, I don't know why God chose to have me be the odd one, I guess. Because most people that get to the point that I was in, their stories don't end like mine. Their stories end completely differently. And I'm very, very, very aware of that. And there's not a day that goes by that I do not thank God that that my story didn't end that night. There's not a single day that I don't go by that I don't thank him for it. But people suffer in silence because there is the stigma for it. I hid what I was going through very well. Now, my family and friends knew the big issues, but they didn't know all of the little things that pushed me to that point, because I didn't talk about those. I hid it. And you don't know what somebody else is hiding in the background either. You see very little of somebody's entire life story. And the sad part about it is, when you do see stuff, a lot of times it's too late.
I don't know how I'm supposed to finish this show, man. I
Sorry.
definitely know. I definitely know now why God was calling me to have you back on the show. It was not because of getting two friends chatting. We can do that on our cell phones. Pretty easy.
Right.
And we do. We text a lot.
Oh, yeah.
But, and I love texting with you. It's always great. But what
Yeah.
it is God gave you a message. And I'm so thankful that I could be a messenger for your story. And that's why you guys need to go check out Kelly's Corner, because this is, wow. I've never had to, quite
And see,
honestly,
I don't even know that you knew my whole story until today.
I did not. And
Like, I'm sure you probably saw pieces of it on X, but I don't know that you knew the whole thing.
I can't say I did. And wow, I this has been one of the most enjoyable podcasts, not just to host, but because, man, have to regroup myself, man. This never happens. I got to pull my together, but it
I threw you
makes
for
for
a
a
loop.
great it makes for a great show. And Kelly, last couple questions for you is this: it one serious and then two kind of fun
Well, I
joking.
don't know how we could go any more serious than what we've gone. So,
Well, I will say this, and I will ask you this: how has God carried you all those 40 years to where you're at today?
it's been him every single day. I mean, literally from before I was born. And this is a podcast episode in and of itself. And I'm going to talk about some of it this week on mine. But literally before I was born, I wasn't supposed to be here. Um, my parents were told that I was going to be born without a brain, and that the only option that they had back in 1986 was abortion, because if I survived, I was going to be a vegetable. I would not live even a whole day, and that the only option that they needed to even consider was abortion. Well, um, my family has always been a family of faith and Christian family, and that was not an option for them. And so uh, they turned to prayer and asked God to heal heal me, but that if He didn't, that He was going to be the one to decide if I lived or died, and that was not going to be something that they decided to do. That was going to be all Him, and that whatever He decided, that He would get the glory for. Um, and I mean, obviously, a miraculous healing occurred at some point in between 1985 and 1986 when the news was had, and then when I was born with a fully functioning brain. A nothing short of a miracle of God occurred. Um, but every single day, most people are kind of upset and sad and fearful and scared and dread turning 40. But knowing what I came from and knowing what I've experienced and lived in the last 40 years, I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it differently, and I look at every birthday, regardless if it's 40 or 87. I look at it the same. I was not supposed to live a day, and so every single day of the last 40 plus years now has been a gift, and I've lived and choose to live every single day of those gifts to the fullest that I possibly can, because I know how quickly it can be taken away, and how blessed and fortunate I am that life is good. And even back in the days when I thought life wasn't so good, and that literally I felt like Job because everything had been taken from me, life was still good because He's still good, and He was still good.
Wow. What an incredible, wow. Thank you, God, for Kelly Cline and that incredible impact that you've had, not only on my life after hearing this story, but the millions, maybe not millions, don't get that crazy, but yeah, the people that are going to watch this episode.
If it helps
I
one, it was
think,
worth it.
and man, I don't even know how to host after this, man. This has been one of the best podcasts for me as a host that I've ever gotten to be a part of. This is actually going down in my top 3 favorite podcasts of all time.
Wow.
Thank you so much for coming on this show. And please, please, please come back and catch up with us again real soon.
Absolutely. Anytime. I'm more than happy to do it.
And where can people go to keep up with you?
I'm on social media, all the social medias, Facebook, X now. I was going to say Twitter, but I think it's X, Instagram, um, all the social medias. You can find me on Kelly's Corner, on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, all the podcast outlets. I'm there. Like I said, I'm doing a new episode this week, and I'll go into a lot more detail than what I just shared on the story behind um, my miracle healing coming into the world and all of that excitement. And we will undoubtedly have to discuss the Challenger in great detail, because you can't discuss January 28th, 1986 without discussing two things, and that's me and the Challenger.
Ladies and gentlemen, before I close out this show, I just want to say there's somebody out there that needs to hear this. May what Kelly said tonight on the show, may that be a reminder that there's still people that care. And if that's not within your family, let that be a song that you hear that changes your life. I'm going to have to go put myself back together after this show. But I thank you all so much for the impact of Kelly. I thank you, Kelly, for being vulnerable to tell that story here on the show. And that's a story that I'm going to cherish forever. And just thank you so much for being the positive inspiration that you are on social media. Go follow Kelly. She's great. And go listen to her podcast, Kelly's Corner. And after hearing this story, I don't know how I'm going to recover from this, but I'll sure try. Kelly, you're amazing, my friend. Keep up the great work. We love you over here. And come back and catch us anytime you want to catch up. We'll be here for you.
Thank you, Caden. It's been great.
Thank you, Miss Kelly. We love you guys. Love one another. And always remember, God's got you. Love you.